4 men will admit to being lonely.
The things you're sharing about men, but women must be a similar number for people who are disengaged at work.
Women do find it easier to talk about how they're feeling. And so what's actually happening is what I call a loneliness spiral.
But when a guy comes back from work, generally his wife will say to him, "So how was your day?" He goes, "All right."
Your brain is telling you, do you know what the answer is? It's a 4-letter word. Fine.
Men need to have that recharge. One size does not fit all, and we are very different in our solutions and what we need as requirements than our partners.
It's just a tiny, tiny little step. And men, they need to be taught how to reconnect. 75% of the suicides are men. The issue is what's going on up in here. Teaching men the simple art of communication with the people in the office, with their mates who they've lost contact with their wives and their kids, is an enormous step forward in changing the way that families operate and the way that men operate in the world.
Welcome back to Gladiator TV. I'm not Dariush Soudi, I'm Dave Crane, but you probably know that by now. Dariush is off saving the world, joining Fantastic Four and Superman and other people who are doing amazing things. He will be back in this chair soon, so don't worry. But what we do have for you is an incredible show, especially if you're one of two things. If you're male, not female, you might find it even more interesting. But if you're female, I think it's really going to resonate with you because you will find that your partner, your family, and your friends are affected by the conversation that we're going to have with you today. The show is called Men Have It Tough. And it's all about the challenges that men are going through that are often invisible, mental, physical, and emotional that nobody likes to talk about. But to talk to us about it today, we have the incredible Steve Ashby, the anti-loneliness guy. Steve, welcome to Gladiator TV.
Thank you very much, mate. Pleasure to be here.
Well, when we first met, which is a little while ago now, we sat at a table at a men's event.
True.
And what I found fascinating was the fact that we had an incredible conversation about how men feel, how men think, the challenges men go through, and the fact that most men have got a real problem not being able to express their feelings. And as I looked around and listened to the conversations around the table, there's probably about 12, 14 people around. Mm-hmm. Not one guy was saying anything honest about their life. They were saying lots of stuff about how things are great. Why would they be in a men's group to connect if all they did was the surface level of conversation, like, I've got a better car than you? But that's what was happening. So I'd like to dig deeper and just reveal a lot about the challenges that men are experiencing. And when we had that conversation, I knew you were the right guy for the things that you're doing now, and also the things that you've experienced, to be able to share that with us. So Steve, who are you, and what do you know that we need to find out?
That's a very good question. Who am I? Mate, I'm 71. I cycle 9,000 kilometres a year. In the last 18 months, I have experienced brain seizures, which are now under control, stage 4B prostate cancer, which is also under control, arthritis, and Peyronie's disease, which the listeners can look up. It's been a bit of a tough road, and in amongst all of that, I discovered that I was suffering from chronic loneliness and isolation. So I looked around to see what could be done about that, and I found through research that a massive number of men are suffering exactly the same thing. 1 in 4 men will admit, and that's just the ones that will admit to being lonely. And then I looked a little bit further into this whole situation and could see the massive impact that it had. And I started by looking at the economic impact, right? Because the guys that we're talking about have all got jobs, or a lot of them, and so they're working for organisations. And they're disengaged from those organisations, for example, and that costs something like $300 billion a year just in the US alone.
Just to explain what disengage means, you go to work, you do your job, but you don't really care what the result is. You're not attached to people at work.
Yep.
You just go and get a paycheck. And if at some point they say, we're going to lay you off, you're like, okay, well, I need to find the money from somewhere else now. But you don't care about the job.
That's exactly right. And what's happened is that the level of engagement has dropped something like 20% in the last 4 years. Absenteeism, for example, is up 22%. Presenteeism, which is where guys go along and just go through the motions, that's costing between 150 and $200 billion a year. The retention rate, only 58% of men who have been interviewed will say that they're going to stay for a year. That's a drop of 18% in 3 years. That's enormous when you consider what's happening in the market in terms of the difficulty of getting jobs. 58% of guys are thinking, I'm only going to stick around for a year.
Can we unpack some of that before we move on? Because these are incredible figures. First of all, the things you're sharing about men, but women must be a similar number for people who are disengaged at work. No?
No. When you look at the comparative statistics for women, they're much, much less. Much, much less. And it goes all the way through the cycle in terms of, let's have a look at men's health. Only 36% of the people who access mental health services are men. And yet they're the ones who are doing the suffering in silence, as it were.
So sorry to jump in because I want to get this thrown out there. So do you think that the fact that women are more driven to be successful in their careers means that they're bypassing these figures effectively of saying, I don't want to be here. They do want to be there, and they do want to grow their career, and they do want to be more focused. Whereas in direct conflict, there might be men who are saying, well, somebody else has got my job, or I'm not able to see where I go with this, and they're kind of giving up. Is there an impact by seeing women growing better into the workforce on men who are doing less involvement and less engagement in the workforce?
There could well be. I don't know how you could actually measure that. The bit that can be measured is the stats around men's loneliness, where, like I said, 1 in 4 men are admitting that they're lonely. The amount of impact that they have outside the office, where those stats bleed into their family life, their social life, and so on. I think women have a better community around them of other women.
Ability to connect as well.
Ability to connect and ability to talk about real things. You were talking about that particular place where we met. And yeah, that is an example of...
we can give a plug for it. British Dad's Dubai. It's a great place, and Bradders has a great breakfast that invites lots of people to come together, and I love it. It's a really good community. That's where we were chatting first.
And look, there are plenty of great connections that are formed there. There are a whole lot of other groups, like the one that Adil is running called Man Cave, or that Lee is running called Men of the Mile, or that Johnny's running called the Boys Club. There are a whole lot of these groups that are springing up now in response to this massive problem. And going back to what I was talking about as far as women are concerned, women do find it easier to talk about how they're feeling. They talk about the things that really matter to them. Men are not so good at doing that. We are not conditioned. We are not
wired.
We're not wired that way.
We're used to hunting in silence in small packs.
Yeah.
So therefore, if you make a noise, you basically alert the target, we're on the way. But you really enjoy the process of shh and moving forward. So if you're sitting in a bar or a restaurant with your mates watching football or watching whatever sport, you might not speak all day, all night, but you had a great time because collectively you don't need to. You've focused and you're enjoying the experience together.
Look, I am sure there are elements of that buried deep in the male psyche. How much, I'm not too sure. I do know that that things like the inability to actually be able to share how you're feeling in the moment has a massive impact. And, the guys that I'm talking to, the ones who, if you like, are remaining silent, are withdrawing, are becoming invisible, whether they're at work or whether they're at home. They lose the capacity to talk to their partners and to their kids, and they even lose the capacity to talk to their erstwhile mates. And so what's actually happening is what I call a loneliness spiral. And what happens is that you start at the top of the spiral and then you work your way down, and you don't realise how far you're going, because once you're on that insidious slope, you are basically becoming more and more invisible. Your brain is telling you, look, it's fine, you're okay. A lot of people feel like this, don't worry about it, you're fine, but actually you're not. And so...
so can I just break that down before we move on to the next stage? Your loneliness spiral includes certain times when you just, forget about it, I'm not going to go there again. And then that becomes the norm as your anchor to that relationship, to that event. So where you'd normally speak up and say, stop, I'm not happy with this, you let it flow. And then you just go through the motions. And so you end up with everything leaving you, so you're just isolated. Because this is really common for being a dad. I'm a dad, I know what it's like. Yeah. My wife being happy means I've got a happy life. My daughter being happy means my wife is happy and I've got a happy life. My own thoughts are very rarely, I'm not good with this, because if they're good with it, I've got a happy life. But it's not about me. And I do sacrifice it and I do love their happiness, but it does come back to you sometimes, where's my bit?
I'll give you a classic example of exactly that point. I was talking to a guy a couple of nights ago, and he's probably in his late 30s, I suppose. He works really hard during the week. His wife stays at home and looks after the kids. When he gets on to the weekend, all he really wants to do is just stay in bed and just chill, because he's worked like crazy all week. His wife, on the other hand, expects him to then pick up what she's been doing, because she's been working like crazy as well. And it's a source of constant tension. And what he finds is that he gets to the weekend and he's got to put all his energy now into the kids. So, and he was saying, I don't know what to do. So I said to him, look, a little bit of coaching, free coaching, because one of the things I do is coach. Why don't you negotiate with your wife that you get an hour on Saturday and an hour on Sunday that are just for you, so that you can recharge your batteries, and then you get into the family. And then instead of you dragging yourself around and the kids saying, oh, what's wrong with Dad? He's in such a grump all the time. You actually have got a bit of energy up. You've had your couple of hours to actually be able to recharge the batteries. But yeah, it's a real problem. And so for a lot of men, they don't have any opportunity to recharge the batteries like that, because work sucks, home life sucks. If they haven't got a job, then they feel inadequate. They stop going to networking events and things like that because of imposter syndrome. They don't want to go up and talk to guys because those guys have got jobs. I haven't got a job, so I feel like a fake. You know what? I'm just not going to go to that networking event. It's better off.
What you said there about work sucks and home life sucks. Most of the time, I don't think they do suck. But what happens is they're not satisfying enough for you to be feeling that you're getting something out of it.
Yeah.
So you kind of resent being there, even though it's you made. You made your office space look like this.
Yeah.
You made and designed your job to give you that kind of money. You could change to a different job. A large part of it is yours, but because there's a certain part of it you don't think you can affect, then the loneliness spiral would drive you to just feel like, as you say, imposter in your own skin, in your own job, in your own life, which makes it challenging. When you talked about the man cave thing, it's really fascinating because I looked into this some time ago. And what I discovered was, and it sounds terrible to say, but this is something that might save a lot of marriages and relationships, so you can verify whether it's true or not. When I get back from work, and I'm blessed to actually work at home, so I see my wife who works at home as well, as a choice that happened during pandemic, or not so much a choice, but it's something that we've continued ever since, so we see more of ourselves and also a daughter. But when a guy comes back from work, generally his wife will say to him, if she's not working, or if they're both working when they get by, so how was your day? He goes, all right.
Do you know
So-
what the answer is? It's a 4-letter word. Fine.
Yeah, fine. Well, okay,
That's it.
it's fine.
Fine.
And she says, okay, so what happened? I said, well, stuff. Well, tell me about it. Well, there's nothing to say. That's just about it. Well, there must be something that goes on. Now, what the guy tends to do is, in those days, you grab a newspaper, or you sit with your phone, or you watch the news headlines, or you go on your computer. You need to have about 20 minutes to decompress, where you don't have any input apart from what you choose to have. There's no output. You need to recharge your batteries with no noise. If you're interrupted during that point, it feels like you've got to start from scratch again, and you get really angry because you really need to recharge that time. So when you do go home, and it's something to explain to your partner if you've had this argument before, which I've had many times previously in previous relationships, you have to say, give me 15, 20 minutes, I'll be all yours.
Yeah.
And so your other half has to leave you alone for the 20 minutes, and then you are ready and open to be part of that conversation. If you don't get that time, then what happens is you resent it being in your face. Now your partner is going, come on, you've been at work, almost like it's an escape from home, because if you are stuck at home, it feels like at least you get out, at least you get to see people. And so a lot of it is just miscommunication. Men need to have that recharge.
Yep.
Women, I'm sure, have their own version of it, but I think what tends to happen is a woman will recharge by chatting her way through that conversation to debrief it. So when I said about men going hunting in packs, in silence, this is going back to the hunter-gatherer days, when we were cavemen or in small tribes, we would go hunting for antelopes or whatever it would be with a bow and arrow and a spear in silence, in focus, in line. Very little being said, or we'd just tell each other what to do. Whereas what would happen with the women, they'd go gathering nuts and berries with the kids and chatting, which is modern shopping, effectively.
Yep.
So you end up in a situation where that has to be respected. And when we're going to go into the figures, which you're going to share with us in a moment, I think it's really important to say this is not men versus women at all.
No.
Men and women, in my opinion, and I'm sure it's true for you as well, Steve, are equally valid but very different.
Correct.
One size does not fit all, and we are very different in our solutions and what we need as requirements than our partners.
See, what you've just described, where the guy needs some time off and the woman doesn't understand why, we've recognised that, and I've put a little mini course together on that called "Do Try This at Home." Because
Okay.
you're familiar with the expression "Don't try this at home." Do try this at home, and it's all about how you actually commence a negotiation with your partner. And you're, instead of going, you always, you never, you're using expressions like, I feel like I need 20 minutes to just decompress. How do you feel about that? Do you need 20 minutes? And you're changing it from being a battle to get that 20 minutes to being negotiation to get an agreed outcome. And just little things like that, it's just a tiny, tiny little step. But what it does is it changes hugely the nature of the relationship, the dynamic of the relationship. And so for me, when I'm looking around at what's causing a lot of men's loneliness, I don't get too much into the whys and wherefores, whether you've got a job or, whether or not, you're stressed at work or whatever. What I look at is how can we, with the least amount of intervention, get you out of that loneliness spiral and over here to learn how to make connections again. Because at the root of all of what we're talking about is the ability to make a connection. Whether it's a connection with an old mate, whether it's a connection with your partner, whether it's a connection with somebody at work. And men, funnily enough, need to be taught, especially if they're in the spiral, they need to be taught how to reconnect. One connection away. That's one of the things that we teach. One connection away.
But the connection isn't everything. There's two questions I've got here. First of all, what's at the bottom of the spiral? Because I know that 75 to 80% of suicides are by men.
Disintegration.
Is disintegration then, and is suicide included in that disintegration?
Yes. Disintegration. Chronic loneliness and isolation. And 75% of the suicides are men. And disintegration is at the bottom. And so what I'm tasked with doing, what I've given myself the task of doing, is to create a framework for men So they can recognize where they are in the spiral. Are they disembodied? Are they disengaged? Are they dislocated? Whatever it is. And then B, to show them that it is possible to get out of that spiral. It is possible to learn how to go and make a connection. Because at the end of it, communication is what it's all about. And if you have spent a lot of time being lonely, you've lost the art of communicating. And so, if you like, what I'm doing is I am teaching men the simple art of communicating. And, whether it's in a corporate environment, we've talked about some of the numbers, the costs to organisations of having men who cannot communicate with each other because they are disengaged, because they're disassociated from the business, because they don't care about the good of the company, is massive. And so, you look at some of the things that companies do, they run team event days and things like that. That's not going to cut it, because that's treating the men as a group. The issue is what's going on up in here. And so a lot of that stuff doesn't actually work. But certainly having coaching programs for particular senior executives and people that are suffering, that works, because the man gets a chance to talk to somebody about how he is feeling. And there's a surprising commonality about how people feel. But the point is, it's giving them an opportunity to talk. Now, I'll give you an example of another, we'll go back to the Man Cave example, that was a fabulous group run by Adul. I sat there and I listened to guys talk about their deepest emotions to guys they'd never met before, because there was an environment that they could trust, and there was an environment that was set up to allow them to do that. And I was thinking, my God, this is just extraordinary. Listening to these guys, no interruption, just get it off your chest, okay? And these guys were sharing a lot. And so I'm working in partnership with those groups through the Vital Men's Room that I'm putting together. I believe there's an opportunity to create a network of these men's clubs, for want of a better word, all over the world, so that the guys who are organising those clubs can share ideas amongst each other about what works, what they've tried and worked. And so suddenly you've got the world's largest collection of men's hubs. There isn't anything at the moment, and I don't have any problem with stepping into a space that doesn't have this thing. And that's what I'm doing.
Again, I love to go back and unpack. As you were talking there, and everything you shared is amazing. It's about 5 questions jumped into my head and out of my head, which is probably part of my age that I disappeared on them. So I want to go back to something I wanted to add earlier, first of all, which is you're talking about the importance on the spiral of having conversations and connecting with people. Connections with people can be very trivial. It doesn't have to be deep enough for it to make a difference, though. Because, for instance, I might know lots of people. I've been in Dubai 30 years, and it's important we're not staying Dubai-centric.
Yeah.
You will find that wherever you live, wherever you're listening to this particular podcast or watching it, you will find that in your hometown or your city or your country, there will be a reflection of this happening too. Just Google it, look it up, talk to your ChatGPT, and you'll find where we're talking about. So you might know lots of people. I mean, my phone, I've got 47,000 connections on it. Some are doubled, some are dead, some are whatever it is. But I have a thing called the airport test. The airport test is if something happened to me and I was incapacitated, how many of the people that are my friends would step in and get my family to the airport and to safety? Now, Dariush is one of the rare people. I've got that many. Yeah. Maybe less, that many, who I know that would step up and say, call my wife, call my daughter, I'm coming round to get you to the airport, let's make sure you're okay. And they do that because of a relationship and how deep it comes. And I don't even need to ask, I just know that's true, and vice versa. What level do those conversations have to be for them to start slowing down the loneliness and start making you feel that somebody out there really cares? Because one of the best ways to connect is to think about with people what's in it for them and do stuff to make them feel better. But if you're both in pain, does that miss the point?
let me go back before I answer that question. And one of the things that we're working on through the Vital Men's Room is creating opportunities for men to be able to talk down to the level of detail and down to the level of specificity that's needed. Just going back a step, there's a very, very large percentage of men who cannot name on the fingers of one hand close friends.
Yeah.
And that has changed dramatically.
About 30-40%
Yeah,
don't have a
it's
close
changed
friend.
dramatically in the last 20 years. You know, you because of the way society works now. And so with society moving and with the whole social media, the arrival of social media,
The closing of bars and clubs.
And what's actually happening is that the places that men used to meet, whether it was the RSA, as we call it in New Zealand, Returned Servicemen's Association, or down at the Working Men's Club, they're not there anymore.
Yep.
And so what's happening is the opportunities for men to get together and just have a chat, and they weren't. You didn't go along to the pub and expect to have a deep and meaningful chat, but I'll tell you what, frequently it happened, because there was your mate, and you go up to your mate and you say, things are a bit dicey at home, Brian. And Brian goes, what's happening, mate? And all of a sudden you have that conversation, but it was never planned. And so what's happening is the opportunities for men to be able to have those deep and meaningful conversations have shrunk. And also the skill of initiating that conversation has shrunk as well. And so through our Vital Men's Room, what we're doing is we're providing online chat rooms and so on for men to be able to have those conversations, because there's something about going to a place where that's the expectation. Man cave. You don't go along to man cave to say, g'day mate, how you going, all right? You don't go there to do that. You go to man cave because part of why you're going there is to open up and unburden. And if you don't want to do that, don't go. You know, so what it calls men to do is to understand that there's a set of expectations, whether it's the boys club run by Johnny, or it's Men of the Mile over here on the Palm run by Lee, or what Bradders is doing with British Dads. And then, 100,000 other types of clubs that are being set up. They are being set up to replace the RSA, the Working Men's Club, sitting in a bar, watching a bit of rugby, whatever, and having a chat with your mate, which happens less and less and less. And so I admire these guys who set them up, what Adil's doing, what Lee's doing. I admire what they are doing. And so what I'm looking to do through the men's room, through our Vital Men's Health and longevity programs, is to actually support what they are doing with some practical things that men can do. Let's look at the Men's Health and Longevity platform that we're putting together. A man of 30 doesn't need the same things as a man of 60 does. So we're looking at things like movement, stretch, brain stretch and body stretch, posture, exercise, nutrition, including supplements and sleep, reflection. These are the elements that men need and people need in general, men and women need, in order to live a long and healthy life, longevity, right? But a 30-year-old doesn't need what a 60-year-old does, so we're creating tiers.
So a 60-year-old needs more of these things than a 30-year-old, is that what you're saying? Because the
different.
suicide rate of over 65-year-olds is massive when the ailments hit them, as you've already explained today, and the mental challenges hit them. They're like, I'm done. There's nothing. Why should women? What am I going to get out of this that I haven't already been through before?
Yeah.
What am I looking forward to apart from the challenges of getting older?
Well, that's exactly right. So therefore, what we want to provide using all of the experts that we're pulling together around those 6 pillars is what's appropriate for a 65-year-old, what's appropriate for me at 71, with cancer and all the other stuff that's happened to me in the last 18 months. What's appropriate for me? What's appropriate for a 35-year-old? They are vastly different, okay? So the beauty of what we're doing is we're not treating men as a body. We're tiering it. That's probably not the right word, but we're separating into tiers. And we want to give men what they need at each stage of their life. Longevity is a reasonable aspiration. People are living longer. And so what we want them to do is have a vital life. That's why we call it the vital program. You know, we've got the vital men's room. We've got the vital men's health. Because, you know the Killers song, Only Human? And there's a fabulous line in there, my sign is vital.
Right.
My sign is vital. I want anybody who comes into contact with any of the stuff that we are doing to be able to think to themselves, my signs are vital. You know, I do this, my heart's beating strong, I do this, my brain is working well, and it's entirely possible. And, you know, if I can just pat myself on the back for a minute, what we're doing is we're integrating all of this in a way that's not been done before. Because there are great experts out there, but they do their little bit. You know the old story about what a
or
PhD...
if it has been done before, it's not widely shared, so we're constantly reinventing the wheel in
and
little pockets.
Yeah, and it has been... Look, we are not going to do anything that hasn't been done before. You know, we're not out to create a new way to get to the moon, okay? What we're talking about is actually pulling all of this body of knowledge that's out there, but it's, as you said, it's in pockets. And so my call it grand, some people would call it insane vision, is to pull it all into one place and then tier it so that you get to be able to see the appropriate stuff for you at your age and stage.
It's a roadmap. It's an ability to see who I am right now,
Yep.
what I should be feeling and experiencing, what's coming next in the future, and being able to deal with it. There's two things I want to ask. First of all, I worked with a lady about who's one of my clients for the Industry Icon program, where I teach people how to position themselves as the best in their niche, and she was an expert in menopause. And when we went to look at what happens with menopause, one of the things that's so fascinating about it is when women start to go through menopause, generally say 40 years old to 55, 60-year-old, they fall out with their husbands, their partners, their bosses, their colleagues. It's a real challenge. And during that time, they don't know what's going on because it's a hormonal thing. They're depressed, they drink a lot of wine, and they have a lot of arguments, and they feel terrible, often suicidal. But what she helps to deal with it with ways of thinking differently, with meditation, with supplements and so on. But if every woman's going through it, and the solution at that time is maybe you don't hold on to your job, maybe you go into a part-time contract with the job and you start your own firm or your own consultancy alongside it. If you know that that's going to happen when you reach menopause, you can tell every 18-year-old girl, here's your career plan. You get your qualifications, you go to your job, you work as far as you can, but before you get to where you are, where you're going to experience menopause, keep the contacts, keep an eye on the ground to if you were going to go independent, what would that be? Which country would it be in? Who would you have on your team? Because otherwise it hits you like a brick wall.
Exactly.
So with this, you're talking about the same thing for men, from a very... When men are willing to pay attention, which is only when something goes wrong, to be honest with you, we could have an idea about what is coming and we could prep for it in advance.
There is a wonderful saying, which is that the advantage of a lack of planning is that failure comes as a complete surprise and is not preceded by a period of doubt and anxiety.
Well, that is true.
So what we're doing with the Vital Men's Room is that we're enabling, with the tiered approach, we're enabling you, if you're 35, to go forward and have a look. In fact, you know, we will have chat rooms where you can go and see, look, this is what the stages look like. So all of a sudden, you're not sort of bumbling through life. You can see how things will change based on what millions of men have gone through. So it's highly unlikely you'll be any different. You can see the changes that will take place, how your body reacts differently at varying stages. And in a way, you know, I'm the perfect guy to do it because, you know, I'm 71, so I'm out there. I can look back and say, hey guys, this is the kind of thing that happens. Now we're getting experts in to be able to bring that into sharper focus. But there's a lot of things that I've done that I would like to say to people, don't do that, it doesn't work. But here I am, I'm 71. I'm still coaching. I spent 35 years in senior roles in HR, so I understand corporate life extremely well. I was vice president in HR in a number of companies. I'm cycling 9,000 kilometres a year. I am a relentless optimist.
I'm gonna unpack some of that with you because I find you're just a fascinating and amazing guy to me. And I want to say one thing before we get onto your story, which is that when you're talking about driving it through corporate, so they understand what's happening to the men in their organisation.
Yep.
In most cases, it comes from the top and filters down to the bottom. Mm-hmm. When an organisation changes, it's because the boss realises there's a problem. But the boss typically, if it's a man, doesn't have anyone to talk to. If he's a CEO, he can't tell anybody around him apart from maybe his board, maybe what he's really going through, because it looks like a sign of weakness. If you tell your office boy, whatever it is, how horrible your life is, then you're showing a sign of weakness that can filter around, and the stock and shareholders can hear that the boss is not happy. You go home, your family, the same experience. You can't really say what's going on at work because they don't want to know. Yeah. And so you bottle it up. So how does that guy drive it all the way through the company when he needs change to happen to himself? He's lonely by design of that job description. Yeah. How is he going to be able to reach out and do it?
Well, for about X thousands of years, everyone's known about the loneliness of leadership.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it was Alexander the Great controlling an enormous army, at the end of the day, the guys who are making those decisions, they don't have, unless they're incredibly lucky, they don't have somebody that they can share that with, which is where really good quality coaching comes in. And so the really good organisations provide programs like the sort of thing that I do. They provide programs where the senior executives, the C-suite, including the CEO, have somebody that they can unpack and talk to in a coaching environment. They don't need a lot of solutions. What they need is somebody to talk to. And good coaching is not about providing solutions. It's about listening and helping people to reframe. Those guys and those women in those senior roles, they've got all the answers. All they need is for somebody to listen to them and then to ask a few cleverly designed questions, and they come out with their own solutions. And then the beauty of it is that the coach follows up and makes sure, most importantly, that they do what they said they were going to do.
Fantastic.
Because at the end of the day, you can go through all of this stuff. I'm gonna, and it's like Yoda said, do or do not. There is no try.
That's true.
I'm going to try this tomorrow. As soon as somebody says that to me, I say to them, so what you're telling me is you're not going to do it. Oh, no, I'm going to try it tomorrow. No, listen to what you just said. I'm going to try. So are you going to do it or not?
I'm a hypnotist. And when I get people hypnotized on stage, one of the ways to get them to do crazy stuff is to say, right, the person I'm touching now, you're going to try and say your name. Yeah. And it's going to come out all wrong. So if I say, right, try and say your name now, they'll go, blah, blah, blah. If I say a name, they'll go, Steve, John.
Yeah.
Because what it means in the brain is attempt to and fail to achieve.
Yeah.
That's how the coding works.
Yep.
And I want to just move on with something that you mentioned there, which is fascinating, all about the fact that CEOs have problems being able to connect and all the things that go with that. And I want to ask you, what makes you tick? Because every 7 years we change. From the age of 0 to 7, when we're very, very young, there's certain things that are important, certain values and so on. Then it changes from 7 to 14, and it changes all the way through our lives, every 7 years. At the age of 71, you are here on the podcast sharing incredible incentives, ideas, implementation. You're creating communities. You're making a worldwide network of men's organizations to make it more effective to be the anti-loneliness guy for people who really need it. You have cancer. You get up at 4:30 and you jump on your bike and you go off when most people are snoring. There's an ecosystem in there. I want to know, if you don't mind me asking, is it chicken and egg? Are you doing this because it keeps you alive? And does it keep you alive to do this? What makes you tick? What makes you do what you do? Is it a money thing? Is it a caring thing? Is it because I've got it and I want to see other people doing better?
That's a good question. When I was 11 years old, my dad, I'm the oldest of 6 children, and my dad got me aside and he said, "Stephen, why can't you be like everybody else?" And I said, "I am. I'm like everybody else." And he said, "No, you're not." He said, "You don't do things that everybody else does. You do your own thing all the time. That's why you keep getting strapped at school." Reverend Mother Burnwood, God rest her soul, And my sister, who was in the same class, would run home in front of us as we were going home, yelling, "Mom, Mom, Stephen's been strapped again."
That's corporal punishment for anybody who has no idea. They'd hit you with a strap or a cane on your hand or your backside.
In the good old days, back in prehistoric times. I have always looked at the world differently. I am a futurist, I've realised. I can imagine, I have a ton of creative ideas. I can imagine a world that doesn't exist yet. And I am relentless. When I've got a good idea, I am relentless in the pursuit of making that idea happen. The number of times I've been told in my performance appraisals and also, in farewell speeches when I've left organisations, if you want something done, give it to Steve. So I combine the ability to have 100 ideas with the ability to do whatever it takes to make it happen. When I go for a bike ride, part of the reason why I cycle is because I get silence and I think. I have the most incredible ideas when I'm on the bike. How do I get to now? I am taking the ideas that I've got and seeing the solutions, because basically I've put all this together myself, okay? And now I'm bringing people in who are helping to build it. And there's going to be a few more people and organisations, I hope, that see that what I'm doing is for the greater good, for 49% of the world's population, and that they're going to support making this a reality. Because I don't actually see anybody else out there doing this. But I'm the engine room. I'm the one who will grind until we get it done. For example, like last Sunday, I did a 90k ride, and towards the end of the ride...
Just say that again. Steve's 71. Last Sunday, he did a 90 kilometres ride on his bike.
Yeah.
Not driving his car, on his bike, legs.
That's
Sorry,
right.
Carry on, Steve.
And I realised that my average speed was 29.3 kilometres over, at that stage, 80 kilometres. 29.3, a world record for me, right? And I thought, okay, I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm not going to drop that. And I dug in and I pushed myself. I was talking to myself while I was puffing and pedalling. And I've rode the next 10K and I didn't let it drop.
Wow.
Now, nobody else, apart from now, but nobody else knew about that. Nobody else needed to know. All I knew was I'd set a performance benchmark for myself and I did what it took to get there. Does that make me unusual? Maybe. It doesn't make... I'm not humble bragging or being vain about it. You asked what drives, who I am. I think I have the capacity to be able to pull all this together because I can make sense of it and make it fit and where the various elements are. And then what I am also very good at doing is talking to people about it and enthusing them about it. And an old girlfriend once said, Steve has an amazing capacity to enthuse and inspire people to do things which are not necessarily to their best advantage.
well,
That we're not together anymore.
I was going to say, if it came from a girlfriend, that's a bit too much information for us to ask about.
But
we're talking about ecosystem.
Yep.
We're talking about an ecosystem that you've just let us into yours, which I'm very grateful you shared. Do people generally have an ecosystem that's planned for themselves, or do they just go through life and let it happen until something goes wrong, and then they've got to backpedal to try and fix it, and sometimes it's too late?
99% of people, men and women, have no plan. They have no plan. And therefore, they're walking backwards for Christmas, as Spike Milligan once said, across the Irish Sea. They're walking backwards. They don't see things coming because they are busy with today. John Lennon, fabulous statement by John Lennon. Life's what happens when you're busy making plans. And these guys don't even make plans. So life just happens. And so what happens, and this is well documented, you watch men and women, particularly men, they have no plan about longevity. They're just going one day at a time. And what happens, and the reason why we've got things like posture and stretch, brain and physical stretch, and exercise in as part of our 6 pillars, is because you need to make sure you're doing things around those 3, and the other one's about nutrition and so on. But what happens is you can see it. Men fold in on themselves. They fold in on themselves like this. And then they fall like dust in a still room. Like dust in a still room. And that's it. And they quietly die. And sometimes they die well before they actually pass away.
Well, that figure there, when we're talking about 7 years, it used to be a typical thing. I don't know if it's true now, but 7 years after retirement was the average time when a man would die.
Yeah.
Because he'd go from every day having the bustle and the fighting and the mindset and all the ongoing stuff of being at work to having all this free time to go in the garden, watch TV, slow it down, maybe potter around, walk the dog if you do. And the body would just go, we're done now. There's nothing else to work on.
Exactly.
And that's actually affecting women as well, because now women have got the same numbers. It used to be that they would live longer than men, but because there's a parity, which is a good parity, that women are getting the same kind of jobs, sometimes if not better, they're suffering from heart attacks, they're suffering from the challenges that men used to have exclusively when they were the main bread earner, and they are finding it hard to be able to deal with retirement.
We might need to it is an extremely good point. And because we're at that stage where we can pivot really quickly, we might need to rename the men's room, the vital men's room, because you're absolutely right. Women are going through this as well. And so maybe what we need to do, what I need to think about is how do we make sure that the things that we're doing, we need to have the tiered approach for women going through menopause, getting into their 60s, etc., and there's a set of things that they need to do around movement, around posture, exercise, nutrition, reflection, sleep, that's appropriate for them. The tiers aren't necessarily going to change, but the people who are in those tiers, men and women, wow, I'm now doing 98%, no, 100% of the world's population, which is fine, because, if the model works for men, and we're proving that up, then why not say this is something that can be done for men and women at the varying stages as they go through.
Would you say you can mix the two together, men and women at the same time? Because I'm really skeptical about that. I think that men and women have different skill sets.
No.
They're more open,
They've got to be separate.
differently. They've got to be different.
Yeah, there is some commonality in terms of the tier approach. So, what's good for a 30-year-old woman is not the same as a woman of 65.
Agreed.
So there are structural things in what I've put together so far for the Vital Men's Room. We can pick up the structure and put it over here. We can move the experts in the various elements from over here. We can do a lot of the things, the online chats, the chat rooms, the weekly sessions using thought leaders. We can take all of them of that and build another one over here. But I think your point is extremely well made. If we try and put men and women together, we end up putting something together that doesn't satisfy either.
And also, it's built into men to not reveal what's really going on when you've got a woman in the room. I'm not saying that's always the case. Yeah. Certainly some people have a great relationship with their partner, with their wife, with their mother, with their daughter, or with a female friend. You can tell them the truth of what's going on. But generally, it's seen as a sign of weakness when a man tells his inner feelings and inner thoughts. The story that I've shared with you, I'm sure, before, which I mentioned before, and I was interviewing Dr. John Gray, the guy who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, one of the most important books on understanding the difference between men and women.
Yeah.
And he was asked by a group of women he was coaching, can you teach our husbands, who are all like cavemen, to suddenly start understanding feelings and emotions because they just pretend it's not there? So he put together a course, started working with them, and about a month later, the women came up to him and complained and said, my man cries all the time. He's soft, and I don't find him attractive anymore. Yeah. He's not the guy. Can you make him a caveman again? Yeah. Because of a difference between what we're conditioned to do and maybe what we're looking for in our partners. There's another level to this. I know you're going to jump in a moment, so I'm not going to take it too far. But we have more divorce than we've had before. Mm-hmm. And when a couple divorces, generally the boy or the girl, whoever it is brought up by the mum. That's what the legal situation is. Yeah. And for good reason, because mums are in pain if their kids aren't being fed. Mums are in pain if the kid's in pain. Dads go, oh, I'm not sure how to deal with it. I didn't even notice, because we're not conditioned to have that same relationship with our kids. But what it does mean is that many of the men who grow up in a home where the mother is looking after them don't have the man, the dad, teaching them how to be men. So what happens is you end up with feelings and understanding, but the conversations you hear are generally mum and her friends saying how bad guys are. When that happens, when you start looking for your partner, you have respect, friendship, all the things that a girl is not looking for in a partner, she's looking for in a male friend. So it makes it very difficult for men to be able to get into that role. We've got a very different world now, which is proving itself with the amount of people who are just saying, you know what, I'm just going to be single. I don't want to meet anybody. Or it's too hard because I don't have the tools of what people used to find easy. Maybe in my day, in your day, you'd just take somebody out, you'd drink, you'd have a party, and see what happened after that. People aren't drinking the same way. They're not connecting the same way. Yeah. It's a massive problem.
I think there's a massive change in the whole nature of the stereotypes, and the trouble with stereotypes is they become so generalised. Not sure about how effective they are, but there's absolutely no question that all of the interaction between men and women, I think, has changed dramatically in the last 25, 30 years, and a lot of it has got to do with social media, and a lot of it's also got to do with divorce rates and so on. So just going back, I go back to the point that trying to put something, like John Gray was saying, trying to put something together which is going to work for both men and women, I don't think that's the right approach. I think men need to have a space and women need to have a space. Now, they operate completely differently in their spaces, so never the twain should meet in terms of what I am working on doing, and we should be very happy about that. So I think the impact, by teaching men how to communicate better, go back to the caveman, very quiet, with the arrow and all that sort of stuff, teaching men the simple art of communication with the people in the office, with their mates who they've lost contact with their wives and their kids, is an enormous step forward in changing the way that families operate and the way that men operate in the world. And look, I can't save everybody. There's a whole bunch of guys that won't want anything to do with this. But there's a pretty sizable population of guys in the world who do want to do something. What they want is for somebody to show them how. And see, that's a really interesting thing I've discovered with men. Talk to me about all this stuff, that's great, but at the end of the day, okay, good. Now, what do I do next? What do I do next? What skills do I need? What do I need to change in order to do, to be able to communicate more effectively? And I love that. I love the fact that at the end of the day, you're talking about practical skill training. And that's extremely achievable. And as I was saying a little earlier on, it's not as though we're having to teach men how to be rocket scientists. All we're teaching men to do and giving them the opportunity to do is to learn how to reconnect. And part of that reconnection is learning how to express themselves. So when you look at what's happening with these amazing groups where men are starting to unburden, let's say, they've found an environment where they can get that off their chest and actually talk. And if you have that happening, and then you have what I'm doing coming along and working alongside, which is, okay, done that, now what? Well, here's the now what. This is about communication skills. This is about making sure that you look at varying levels in terms of age, how you're going to have a long and healthy and happy life. I look at my brothers and sisters, and I've got two of my siblings who have been married for 45 years and longer, and they are so happy together. It's extraordinary.
But they're from a different age where you weren't making different expectations of your partner. You decided that this is us together and this is what makes it work. I mean, I think that the decision making, typically, I'm not saying about your family because I don't know your family, but typically dads of that age would just put up with it. They're not happy with it, but would just put up with it because that's what you do. You'd sit there having Sunday lunch in your suit. At home. I'm not knocking it, but there was a certain element of that truth.
Well, I can't imagine either my brother or my brother-in-law doing that. But yet on I grew up in the same family, and I, have these wonderful brothers-in-law and sisters-in-law, and yet I've had 2 failed marriages, and, that's not one of my skills, apparently, to keep a sustainable relationship. But,
But what do you think about it? It's nothing to do with me, but I want to ask you about it. 71 years old, are you looking to find that partner, remarry? So you're still up in the market and you're still out there?
I'm on Bumble.
Oh, good. In that case, look out for Steve on Bumble. Let's rewind it a little bit because I want to look at the fact that we're talking about the next generation of men and what they've got to deal with. When you talk about the incredible men's organizations that are now starting to happen, I do see a lot of toxic masculinity being in the mix. And sometimes, and it's easier to flip it. I won't mention names because I don't want to give them credibility, but it's easy to flip it to go from, if you're a man, you should be proud of yourself, of your achievements, and you should work hard to be who you are, and don't lessen it by weakening it, by trying to be who everybody else wants you to be. I get that. But not necessarily at the detriment of women, and not necessarily at the detriment of other men. Now, that's my opinion. I think that everyone deserves a chance to be successful. And if I'm successful, it's because I've created community and relationships. It's not because I've stood on somebody else's head. But a large amount of the world right now is doing that. Young men now, I mean, I don't know the actual numbers, but I would guess that 1 in 4 at least suffer from massive loneliness. I would say that maybe 1 in 3 have made a decision that they're not going to find a partner. Something like under 21s, maybe it's over 21s. The numbers I was listening to the other day with a guy called Chris Williamson, who was just talking about this whole subject, saying that there's so many men now who cannot see themselves in any kind of relationship. They've just given up. They've got a world now where I don't like women, I just do my own thing. In fact, the whole incel thing, to be celibate and on my own. Now, I don't want to point a finger at anybody else's lifestyle or choices and say you're wrong, But I do think that there are some challenges that are going to come from this new way of looking at life that's not going to serve those people, and it's not going to make it easy for those that they want to interact with. If it's like, for instance, Darwin, and the ability to adapt is what helps you survive as a species.
Yeah.
If you don't change, then there's no reason why the dinosaurs, apart from when you go and see Jurassic World, don't exist anymore, because you might be the biggest and strongest, but if you can't change when it gets cold, you're gone.
I think you're absolutely right. And there are some people, and we both know who we're talking about, but we don't need to name names. There are some people who have made a profession and an enormous amount of money out of playing on those young men's fears and insecurities, and that's that's life. That happens, and that's also something that's been around for 1,000 years, or since time immemorial. There's always been people who prey on and I don't mean weaknesses in a bad way, but on the insecurities and the fears of other people. That's how you get.
In the day that joined the army. You're ex-armed forces. Did you say that you were before, or we had a conversation about armed forces somewhere in the conversation we had before? But typically, when men get like that, go and join the army or the navy, air force. Go and see the world. Learn a trade. And by the time you come out, then you're ready to enter society. That was the way. We don't have wars, thank goodness, in the same ways we used to. And there's no national service in most countries as there used to be. So where's that gap going to get filled?
The gap is going to get filled by people like me doing what I'm doing, because it's almost like men are going to do what men are going to do. Going through the incel movement, going through the kind of manosphere kind of stuff. I'm not sure what the right terminology is. I haven't looked at it very closely. But what I want to be there is, when they get to 30 to 35, and they've gone through all this stuff, and then somehow maybe they then start looking around saying, you know what, maybe I actually do want to be in a relationship. Maybe I do want to have a more complete life instead of basically being a hater about everything, including women. And so what I'm putting there is like a beacon. It's like a lighthouse.
A choice.
And I'm saying, hey, look, we don't judge you. We don't judge whatever you've been doing for the last 15 years since you were 20. That's entirely up to you. You live your life. What we're doing is giving you a choice. If you would like to take a different perspective on your life, if you would like to be thinking about the things that are going to make the next 40 or 50 years for you enjoyable, then come and join us. If you would like to be in chat rooms with guys who are having the same revelation about the fact that there is another way to live, then come and join us. And once they start, and once these guys see that there is another way of doing things, hopefully we will be able to have a positive impact on their lives. Now, like I said before, I don't think that what I'm doing is about saving everyone. I am not some religious leader that's going to save every man on the planet.
It's not a cult.
It's not a cult. What I'm doing is I'm putting frameworks together, easy to understand frameworks, where I'm providing men at varying ages with information that's relevant for them at their age and stage around those 6 pillars that I keep mentioning about stretch, movement, posture, exercise, nutrition, reflection, and sleep. Talk about sleep. Do you mind if we just... I know we're just going to jump on it.
Please go ahead. I don't get much sleep, so I'd love to know more.
Lack of sleep costs $411 billion a year in terms of lost productivity, anxiety, and a whole range of other things that lack of sleep does. It interrupts just about everything. It has an impact on relationships. It has an impact on the amount of endorphins and dopamine that your body is getting, the positive stuff. It shortens your lifespan. If you have difficulty sleeping and you don't do anything about it, the statistics show that 20 to 30% more likely to die of premature death rather than the average, that it causes massive issues in terms of lack of productivity at work because you're just too tired to work, and then all those other things that we were talking about happen, and the presenteeism, which is an enormous number. You go along to work, you're there so you get paid your salary, but you're so tired that you can't do your job. Presenteeism costs 4 times more than absenteeism. You'd be better off staying at home and getting a decent sleep. And from an organisational perspective, you cost the organisation less. I know it sounds crazy. You'll cost the organisation less if you stay home and get a good night's kip or a good day's sleep if you need to, than going to work and just dragging.
But that's not a male-only problem.
No,
that's
true.
Male and the female issues there. So it's something that I think needs to be addressed as an organisation with staff, or as people are finding it more and more challenging. I sleep terribly, and I have done for 20 years. And it's not because I'm worried that my wife's going to put a pillow over my face and stop my legs kicking. It's because of the fact that my background was being a DJ with late nights, but then I changed it to be able to get up early to get my daughter to school, which is a very important part of who I am. And I don't DJ or anything late at night now, but I still have habits that make me feel like sleeping is cheating. It feels like subconsciously. So I have to force myself to go to bed relatively early. And right now during the summer holidays, it's bliss. No school starts, no school anything apart from obviously making sure she gets her homework done. But sleep is an issue, and you've mentioned it there, is a challenge, maybe for another conversation and another podcast to look into that with more interest in it, and also go deeper into the impact of it, because I'm sure that lots of people feel the same thing as well. You've got to be doing, 8 hours of sleep is about right? 6 to 8?
The statistics show that you need less sleep as you get older. So take me, for example. 4 days a week, I'm up at just after 4 o'clock because I get ready, have a cup of tea, get on the bike and go and do things before it gets too hot. Now, what I was doing is I was still going to bed at 11:30. So I was getting 4.5 hours of sleep, and it was really hurting. So now I've just set a simple thing where I now go to bed at 9. I don't miss anything that's going on in the world by going to bed at 9 o'clock. I get now 6 or 7 hours of pretty good sleep. And since I made that decision a year or two ago, it's had an enormous impact. And I reckon one of the reasons why I have got through the stuff that I've had to get through, losing 10 kilos, I'm not overweight. I lost 10 kilos from the meds for the brain seizures, right? Luckily now it's working perfectly. But, getting through all that, getting through the cancer and so on, had I still been sleeping as badly as I was before, I don't think I'd be sitting here having a good conversation. I've also realised that I need to have a nap every day. A, because of the meds, but B, because, I'm not as young as...
I love naps. I love it. It's cheating. It's one of the few things that as a kid I hated, but as an adult, just go, I should have had more naps. Amazing.
When I know that I need a nap, I've got 38 seconds to go from, I think I should lie down, to when I'm asleep.
But never on your bike. That would be bad.
Never on my bike. Yeah. But there's a wonderful saying about cycling, and it just goes back to this whole thing about age. You don't get old. You don't stop cycling when you get old. You get old when you stop cycling.
Isn't that true?
And that's true. Why can't I be cycling when I'm 90? There's no reason at all. I know how to turn my pedals over. Maybe at the moment I'm keeping up with guys half my age, except on the hills. I keep up with guys half my age.
Amazing.
No problem. But when I'm 90, maybe not.
It's like the phrase, isn't it? How do you run a marathon? Well, you put one foot in front of the other and repeat.
By the way, I used to run marathons and I was quick, under 2 hours 40. And for those who know what a marathon under 2 hours 40 is, when you know, you know.
There we go, and I couldn't even drive that far. Steve, it's been a complete pleasure talking to you. How can people connect with you? What is it that you got coming up for people? What's the best way to get that detail and have a chat with you for feeling the issues or getting you to come into the organization to talk to the men and the women in the organization and also to join your community? What do you recommend?
I think going on to my LinkedIn page would be best. It's fairly succinct about the kind of things that we do.
Is it Steve Ashby? Just LinkedIn /com/ Steve Ashby.
Yeah. And it's very easy to find, and you'll see the kind of things that we do, from the corporate coaching programs that we have, the individual one-on-one coaching that we do, and also the online courses that we're putting together, the upcoming book that I'm working on at the moment. And then, of course, the development with these experts that I'm already pulling around to put together the Vital Men's Health and Longevity platform, and also the Vital Men's Room, which is the online community, which, call me crazy, but it's going to be global. And why not?
You'll save a space in the men's room for me. I've never said that to another man before, but this time it's something I'm going to say.
Yeah, well, okay, we'll think about how we phrase that.
I think it sounded just perfect.
It does actually, yeah.
Steve, it's been a pleasure having you, and thank you for taking the time to come into Gladiator TV and sharing your thoughts. And I wish you all the very best. I look at what you're doing, the things you've overcome, and the things that you're putting into place to help others in the future. And I think not only are you making a huge impact, but also you're giving us a role model that we could consider ourselves to work towards as well, where you're giving back as well as keeping your own ecosystem working. So it's going to give you longevity, it's going to give you happiness, but you also can pass it on and pay it forward to other people. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Really.
I hope you enjoyed this incredible conversation with Steve Ashby. Connect with him on social. Start off with LinkedIn, and you'll see under the connections all the other things he's doing. Get involved. Share the insights from here, and make sure that whether you're male or female or whatever your particular choice is, there are people around you who are not as confident or don't even know what you're going through, and you're never alone, but make sure you let them know that they aren't either. Really important, and I hope you got something out of today's podcast that you can use to move forward into the future. Talking about the future, we will get Dariush back in this seat in another episode coming soon. Meanwhile, it's been an honor having you with us. If you've got any thoughts, comments, questions, or just want to share this podcast with somebody who needs to hear it, please feel free. It's our gift to you. But meanwhile, we look forward to catching up with you and some more incredible guests in this space, on this channel, in the future. Thank you for watching Gladiator TV.